Well, it sounds like we're live, giving people a little bit more time to trickle in here. But we'll go ahead and get started in just about 30 seconds or so.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Oh, I see
Yeah, it's
people
really starting to
flowing in.
populate now.
There we go.
If if you could just put where you are dialing in from in the chat, just as a little icebreaker, that would be great. And while you're doing that, I think we'll go ahead and start with some very brief introductions. Welcome, everybody. I'm Bram Wessel. I co-founded Factor 13 years ago with my business partner, Gary Carlson, to bring human-centered design philosophies and methods and practices to large-scale information challenges. And even today, in the era of AI, I believe that this information is for humans. So that's sort of our perspective. Malcolm, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, Bram. Hey, everybody. I'm Malcolm Hawker. I'm the Chief Data Officer of Prophecy. We make stuff called MDM, Master Data Management Software. I've been doing this role for about 4 years, and prior to that, I was an analyst at a company called Gartner, where I was making quadrants of magic and cycles of hype. In the IT space, I've worn just about every hat that you can wear. I've been a CIO. I have been a chief product officer as well. I started my career on the product side of the house. Been an analyst, been a consultant, been a vendor, you name it. I'm what they call a thought leader. So know the space incredibly well. Happy to talk more about this idea of a semantic architecture. Excited for our chat today.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. I think where we want to start, the pretext for this was some research that we saw probably about a year ago from MIT, which claimed that 95% of AI pilots are failing to show any measurable ROI. And that just seems crazy to us. So I guess I'll toss it over to you with the first kind of question. What do you think the reason for that low success rate with ROI is?
Oh boy, where do I start? Well, first of all, if we're to believe the MIT study, and I think we probably should, there are things to be said about the methodology, about the sample size. We don't need to parse out whether or not the
Sure.
study was any good or not. Came from MIT, okay? So I mean, fine. What's the root cause? Well, if we're to believe the folks from MIT, the root cause is a mismatch between the technology and the use cases. But that's just really, really broad, right? That's really broad. I think when we kind of peel the onion a little bit on that, what we see is a few things. One is a general misunderstanding of the best use cases for generative AI based
Hmm.
technology, right? Where it's maybe this is a bad metaphor, but it's the using a baseball bat to kill a fly, right? Or or
Yeah.
or or the inverse, right? Where it's just a bad fit, right? Where the solution didn't align to the customer requirements. I think that's an easy one. I see that all over the place where, it's a hammer looking for a nail. Okay. We've got boards of directors out there saying, let's go, let's do AI, let's do AI. Companies are embarking on this stuff. And lo and behold, they could have used a much simpler solution or a much more
Yeah.
inexpensive solution or something else.
Yeah.
I think there's other things going on as well. I think that there are hidden cost issues here that not a lot of people are talking about. I'm not entirely sure that the ROI makes any sense. I had a discussion with the CDO of an extremely large, very well-known insurance company where they are trying to digitize a lot of their old paper-based stuff. And I said, hey, wow, perfect Gen AI use case, right? Like you could just feed in all of your old insurance claim forms written in paper, on
Hmm.
paper, and have Gen AI parse all of that out and put it into some sort of structure so that you can, start making some informed decisions based on that. And they're like, no way. Way too many tokens for that use case,
Yeah.
right? Like it's cheaper just to use good old OCR, optical character recognition technology. So I could keep going here. But I mean, it for the most part, what I'm seeing is that companies are learning, right? They're stubbing their toes, and I guess maybe that's the point of a POC.
Yeah. Uh, well, what I've sort of come to observe in this environment is that uh, we've heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out, and uh, I think that a lot of companies, their data just isn't quite ready. for artificial intelligence. Now, we're going to get into that because I think
Yep.
it's how it's not ready that really matters here. I think it basically comes down to LLMs are really good because they're probabilistic. They're really good with large unstructured masses of data. I mean, ChatGPT was trained on the internet essentially. What they're not so good at is when they get in a specific environment. What are your thoughts about that?
So what you just said, I completely agree with. Although I do have a little bit of an antibody response to this idea of readiness, because it's most certainly not deterministic, right? I suspect you have plenty of data that is fit for purpose for some AI use cases, and plenty of data that's not. So the idea that it's this deterministic yes or no, I've got a little bit of a semantic twitch when I hear this idea of readiness. But I agree with what you said, and that could be encapsulated in the first kind of failure mode of these Gen AI use cases, which is they're trying to use this technology and assuming deterministic behavioral patterns, and it's not.
No.
Right. And I think that that's part of it, right? Or they're assuming that they could throw a whole bunch of structured data that was built on deterministic rule sets into the mix of Gen AI and then have Gen AI behave in a deterministic way, and it doesn't. Right. So
Right.
this I think is encapsulated in this idea of is your data ready, right? You could have the world's greatest structured data set, and if you are not running knowledge graphs, if you don't know how to vectorize that data, if you don't know how to put it in a way that is easily digested by LLMs, you're going to hit a wall. So that this idea of the wrong technology for the wrong use case has got an extremely broad um, uh, perspective on
Yeah.
it that easily encompasses this idea of some of your data being not ready or ready.
Yeah. So some of the core use cases, if I really sort of, you know, create a hierarchy of these, the two biggest ones that we've encountered so far are one, where did we put this thing? And two, uh, I just want to ask a question and get a reasonable answer or even a good answer. In the first use case, it's really, we're asking LLMs to parse all this structured data, but they don't understand what a thing is necessarily. And then in the second use case, we're asking them to answer a question, but they don't really have the context to answer that question within an enterprise's environment.
Yeah, yeah. And so now you're talking my language. I for the better part of the last 20 years, I've been an expert in this field known as master data management, MDM. And the idea of how do I define a thing
Yeah,
is core to MDM. And as a matter of fact, we actually use the phrase often thing. You can master things. It's just a noun, right? It's just a noun. It could be an asset, a location, a person, an employee. It doesn't matter. But how do I define the thing? Right.
right.
And in a highly structured data set, like a customer table sitting in Salesforce, you can generally infer what the thing is, but not always. Right. Not always, particularly since the definition of the thing is inherently contextual, right? The
Yes,
definition of a
yes,
customer to finance is
yes,
different than the definition of a customer to marketing and
right.
vice versa. And I've been the guy. I have been the guy that has convened those two groups, brought them into a
Yeah,
room together, and said, "Hey, let's figure out a common definition for customer." And those are some of the worst meetings of my life, right?
yeah. I've
Where
been
I
in those
walked out,
meetings too.
yeah, battered and bruised,
Yeah,
and where I didn't get anywhere because we never got them to necessarily agree. So
yeah,
as much as there necessarily needs to be a common definition of the thing within a different context, meaning if your CFO asks you, how many customers do you have? You damn well better be ready to give one answer and give it confidently. The answer to your CFO cannot be, what do you mean by a
yeah.
customer?
It depends. It can't be that.
Well,
Yeah,
right, and it's
yeah,
solving for both, right? It's supporting those domain-centric use cases, but it's also supporting the CFO. And this is where a lot of folks in my world, in the data world, get really hung up on this kind of deterministic. It is the single source of truth to end all truths, or it doesn't work, and it can actually be both. So, what's the thing? I mean,
yeah.
yeah, that's a hard one.
So people who are familiar with Factor might be wondering right now. It's like single source of truth. That's usually what I come to a company like Factor to help us solve. Well, it's more complicated than that. It's sort of, this ecosystem where there are sources of truth, but they need to be contextualized with each other. And what we say at Factor is, and I'll give Bob Casenchak, one of our employees, credit for this: things, not strings. So LLMs are really, really good at looking at strings and using billions of parameters to parse those strings and predict what the next character should be out to, I think it's like 18 or 19 words in some of the newest models. So they're really good at
Oh,
writing,
wow. Okay.
sentences and paragraphs and pages and even Russian novels. But what they're not really good is at distinguishing things from strings. You have to tell them what the things are. I think that's one of the big differences.
Well, yeah, and shout out to Bob. I think he's on. I met him at KM World. I gave a keynote speech at the taxonomy boot camp, and Bob asked a couple really hard questions. So he's good at
He
asking.
does that.
Yeah, he's good at asking very, very hard questions, which is exactly what there's Bob, which is exactly what I would expect from a consultant that I would want to trust in this space. Got to ask the right questions. But yeah, I completely concur. But in my world, I take it one step farther than the thing, which is loosely tied to the idea of identity validation and verification, right? Is John Smith, Jon Smith, the same thing as John Smith? It can
Yes,
even be the
right.
same, conceptually the same thing. But if somebody fat fingered some entry or there was an honest mistake somehow, some way, being able to disambiguate John from
Right.
John is a world that I live in. But getting back to the thing about the thing about the thing.
Mm.
The story that I used to tell, I'm just kind of putting on my analyst hat when I would have these conversations when I was at Gartner, is I would say that things exist, roughly. Now this is like extremely high level, C level kind of talk about how to understand these things at three levels within an organization: function, cross function, enterprise wide,
Mm.
right? And you have to be able to solve for definitions across all of those
Yes.
things. Maybe another way to look at it is a three-ring Venn diagram, right? And at the edges of the Venn diagram, or this would be the lowest level of the pyramid, knock yourself out. Do whatever you want. Call the thing whatever you want to call the thing. But the minute that data, right, or insights or knowledge or whatever you want to, whether it's text or whether it's the intersection of a row of a column, the minute insights start to go from one function to another, right? And a good way to think about this in my world is through a complex business process: quote to cash, procure to pay.
Mm.
Data is moving across these complex workflows. And the minute you traverse one of those lines in the
Yeah.
three-ring Venn diagram, or the minute you go from functional to cross-functional, is the minute at the very least, you need to have some conceptual link between those things,
Right.
thing one and
Right.
thing two. Right?
Yeah.
We can have an academic argument about whether it needs to actually become one thing. Maybe it does, or at the very least where you're linking the two separate things. And this is starting to
Right.
get very meta. I don't know. What do you think about
Yeah.
that, Brett?
No, what I think is that well, I'm going to tell a quick little story, a quick little aside. So we worked with a legendary marketing organization. They spent $2 billion a year on marketing. It's a Fortune 100 company at the time. They've fallen on harder times recently. And there was a whole campus where the marketing organization lived, thousands of people. And you could walk around the cafeteria at this campus, which was in Hillsboro, Oregon. And I did this once. You could ask seven different people, "Wow, you work in this legendary marketing organization. Books are written about the brand that you represent here. Tell me what a campaign is." That seems to be the fundamental unit of a campaign. You get or of a marketing organization. You get
Yeah.
seven different answers, and then you get one person who would kind of scratch their head a little bit and say, "You know what? I can't tell you, I can't give you a holistic definition of campaign because it means different things in different parts of even within one marketing organization, there are multiple contexts." So what we help them do is essentially build, well, at the time it was called their enterprise unified enterprise taxonomy. But what it really is kind of they eventually move to a knowledge graph. It's kind of a graph of their internal contexts. So you could say, okay, so campaign. Let's disambiguate campaign. Campaign means a bunch of different things in a bunch of different contexts. Let's talk about how campaigns are related to other things you mentioned before. What is the notion of a customer in this context, in this organization? What's the notion of a customer for sales? What's the notion of a customer for marketing? And model all of those things. And we'll talk about not boiling your data lake later on, but model those things so that you had a shared source of truth. It's not a
Yeah.
single source of truth. It's a shared source of truth. So, so that, I mean, people are starting to refer to things like that. We didn't know we were building this at the time as context graphs.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the idea of shared meaning or shared definitions or shared data. And if I actually floated the idea when I was still an analyst of renaming MDM, master data management, to shared data management, because
Hmm.
essentially that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. It is data that is shared widely across the organization that needs consistent meaning, aka semantics, needs consistent structure, needs consistent quality standards. Because if my quality standard is a 3 out of 10 and yours is a 9 out of 10, we're still going to have a problem, even if we understand what things mean, right? Even if we understand what they mean. So I love that idea of shared and sharing. And it's so interesting in my world, we've gone this pendulum constantly swings
Yeah.
between centralization and decentralization, between control and
Oh,
between
yeah.
autonomy. And we really struggle with this, and we seem to kind of like whipsaw back and forth between these two extremes. A good example would be something that was all the rage a couple of years ago was something called a data mesh, which said, "Hey, go and let your business domains, marketing, sales,
Yeah.
whatever, go do whatever they want to do from an analytics perspective, right? And define things however they want to define things." And I'm like, okay, well, that's great for the edge of that Venn diagram. But the minute that contract closes in Salesforce and needs to go into your ERP so you can actually start to recognize some revenue on it, good luck having different definitions of what a customer is
Right.
because everything will break.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
that's the context. That's the knowledge graph slash context graph, and we can talk about the
Yeah.
differences of the two. That's exactly the graph that you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'm going to flash up a slide really quickly here. Um, Here we go. So this is a slide that we sometimes talk with our customers about. So this is really actually kind of what people mean, I think, when they're starting to define what a context graph is. So these layers here are sort of how we define the semantic foundation, and that's what you've all come to hear about is the semantic foundation. Um, we have to think about the entire enterprise holistically. So we think about the technical layer, we think about the experience layer, and then we think about what is the information layer, that layer that sort of exists between. And that exists whether you have that encoded or implemented in systems or experiences. It's kind of like math. It exists whether you acknowledge it or not. And so what you can do is you can model things like customer. Hey, look, there's customer. You can model things like campaign. And once you model these things, and you do that sort of based on the organizational alignment, understanding the use cases, user needs, your technical readiness, how well you're tooled. You want to make sure that governance is inherent in the model itself, and how is this going to be used. So once you start doing that, then you can light up these boxes up here. You can light up, and share things across all of these enterprise capabilities, essentially. So then, let's say you do this just for enterprise analytics. Well, then you have all the stuff modeled, and you can reuse that and share that when you bring in personalization or sales enablement into this shared context.
I love it. Something we often say about governance, which is what you just said, which is you can formalize it or not. it's still going to happen.
Yeah,
And this is kind of like governance is kind of like the candle on the birthday cake that never goes out. You can't blow it out.
yeah.
It will just naturally start
That's
popping
great.
up. And a friend of mine has written a few books on this. His name is Robert Siner, Bob Siner. He's popularized this idea in our space of called non-invasive data governance, which basically just says what I just said, which is it's going to be there whether you want it or not. And in my world, governance goes well beyond just access and security, right? Actually, I consider definitions a governance task
Yes,
inherently. I inherently, right? Because if one group says it's something and another group says it's something else, okay, well that's fine. But if you need some idea of collaboration there and a common definition, shared meaning, that requires some idea of governance, I would argue, right? Whether it's
yes.
formal or whether it's informal. Now, interestingly, only recent data suggests that only about 40% of companies have a formalized governance function.
Mm,
60% do not
yeah,
have a formalized governance
no,
function, which means the stuff in the middle here, Bram, is happening organically.
organically.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. And we
this
can talk
is,
about whether that's good or bad. I'm not judging, but it's happening in some shape or form, and it's happening often in very, very organic ways, which tend to be highly inefficient.
yes. And when you start to formalize this, you need to accommodate that organic growth. You can't make this so brittle and rigid and to say what you were saying earlier, deterministic, so
Yeah.
rigidly deterministic that it can't evolve with changing conditions. Because the minute you create the model, no model survives contact with the enemy, essentially. The minute you create something, the conditions change. It's kind of like anthropology. The minute you observe something, you've impacted it, you've affected it. We're working with another Fortune 500 company right now, and they are trying to do some of this work, and they're migrating to a knowledge graph capable tool. In this case, it's one of the semantic management tools. In this case, it's the top quadrant tool. There are others like Pool Party
Okay.
and Synaptica. Um, and now the organization that has built this sort of information layer is starting to encounter other organizations who want to share that information. One of them is data analytics, data governance. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so they're using a master data management tool. They're using Calibra. So what our challenge is to be able to figure out how do we share information between this taxonomic ontological knowledge graph entity and how things are modeled and managed and governed in something like Calibra. And I imagine you have some experience with things like that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I have experience within my little silo, right? But I don't have a ton of experience in busting out of that silo into the world of knowledge management, which is what we need to figure out.
Yeah,
We
yep.
desperately need to figure out. I was like blown away when I was blown away when I was at KM World, and Andreas was giving a little demo of Pool Party, and I'm like, that looks an awful lot like a combination of a data catalog and MDM. In fact, I can't really even distinguish it from what we would call the data catalog plus MDM, right? And I walked around the show floor of KM World, and what I saw was software after software after software that looks practically identical to Calibra and to the things that my company Prophecy does around MDM. And it's the same problems. We're just coming at it from different sides of the same coin, right? The one
Right.
coin, the shared use case is we need to figure this stuff out for AI, right? We need to make
Yes.
our insights trustworthy, consistent, accurate, slightly predictable, right? We need to govern them because we, meaning the people of the data world and the people of the knowledge world, now we have a shared use case, which is AI. So we're all on the
Yes.
same boat and we have to solve these problems. And this is why I'm so excited to be here. And this is something I'm going to be talking about a lot at data conferences this year is this idea of finding a way to pull these worlds together in the service of this shared use case because we desperately need to figure this out, right? And I know in the knowledge world, it may be, especially for some librarian scientists, library scientists want to maybe kind
Yeah.
of throw up in their mouth every time they hear somebody say DIKW framework. But for a knowledge Luddite like me, that framework I find is useful. And what we need to be able to do is traverse across all the way from the bottom to the top and from the top to the bottom.
Right.
Right? If you have a knowledge-based insight, if you've got 200 pages of text, you need to be able to get that in a form that is easily measurable. You need to atomize that, to data, and vice versa. This is what we're trying to do with context and knowledge graphs: is go from data into more insight level, into higher levels
Right.
of insight,
Yeah.
into information, into knowledge. So if I had a bag of money, I was just on a podcast yesterday that was kind of more startup centric, and somebody was asking me about, where to invest and what do you think the bigger problems are? I said if I had a bag of money right now, if I had a giant bag of money, which I don't, but if I had a giant bag of money, I would be investing in this thing that we're talking about. This this
Yeah.
this this layer that is the connective tissue between data and knowledge, that is the connective tissue between structured data and unstructured data.
Unstructured data. Yeah.
Call it a context layer, call it a semantic layer, call it a data fabric. I don't care. You can call it Fred. I don't care what you call it, but that thing is critical. It's why
Right.
Salesforce bought Informatica. It's
Yes.
why ServiceNow bought Data.World. And we're going to see more and more and more of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a question for you. So you
Sure.
talk to CDOs all the time. Your podcast is called CDO Matters. So you take this question to a CDO. Is their reaction going to be like, "Oh my God, this problem is too big. It's we're not going to be able to like what I say is we're not going to be able to model the ocean."
Yeah. I'm going to say something, and I don't want this to sound judgmental because it's not. Um, if you talk to most CDOs and said, "Hey, listen, where are you in terms of integrating knowledge management capabilities into your broader scope,
Right.
into your broader remit? Where are you? What do you think about that?" I think the answer would generally be, "What do you mean?" And I
Huh.
don't mean that to be judgmental or negative, but I think that is I'd be willing to bet that would be the answer 70 to 80% of the time. And the reason is because it's just outside of the scope of most of these CDOs. It just
Yeah.
is,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
Like we have everything we've done. We've built a house around the world of measurement. Okay. We have not built our house around the world of meaning. We haven't.
Right. Oh.
Everything we have done, everything is around the facilitation of accurate and consistent and trustworthy and insightful measurement. And that's great, but learning management systems, knowledge management systems, content management systems, SharePoint servers, I mean, unstructured data, can't easily throw that into Databricks and do a dashboard on it. So, what do you want me to do with this?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and as somebody who started a company to focus on meaning, after 13 years, I'm finally starting to feel seen because this is that critical problem that you're talking about. And one of the things that we encounter when we hear the feedback, oh, this problem is too big, we don't have time or we can't afford to model all of this stuff because we have to implement AI yesterday, or we have these whatever the business pressures might be. Well, so there's somebody that I follow in our field. Her name is Ashley Faith, and Ashley she's a great podcaster, and I'll put a link to a specific video where she says basically, you already know what a context graph is. Um, and her big point recently has been, let's limit the domains and it's sort of like just in time or just enough modeling. So what if we took an AI pilot that's, been shown to be, some percentage approaching 95 ineffective at ROI? What if we took that and incorporated in some modeling and some, knowledge graph foundations or semantic foundations for that, but just for that use case, just for that domain. Getting back to that diagram that I flashed earlier, it's like, okay, let's just model this for one use case because we can reuse that. and we can add to that, like sort of building blocks. So that's why I say you don't need to model the ocean, and don't boil your data lake.
Unless
Uh,
you want to cook lobster. And in that
right.
case, yummy, yummy lobster. I'm joking, of course.
Or
You,
Dungeness crab out here. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now you had asked me about not modeling everything, and I kind of skirted around that answer, or at least the question, and couldn't agree more. In my world, there is a tendency for CDOs to want to inventory everything. I think this inherently
Yes.
traces to. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid growing up, I loved Lego, right? And
So did I.
I loved to sort my Lego. I like to put it into various piles based on color or based on shape. There's something, and data people all tend to kind of be this way. I think we're librarians at heart, and we want to
Yeah.
classify it all and sort it all and label it all and structure it all. But when Pareto would tell us consistently that 80% of the value is going to come out of 20% of those Lego pieces that you use over and over and over again. So, do we need to context graph everything? No. Do we need to glossary everything? No. Do we need to define? No. We just focus on the stuff that matters. And I love Ashley's guidance here because work backwards from the things that matter the most, right?
Yeah.
And and maybe even a master data perspective, that shared data, customer, supplier, asset, location. I mean, customer, who's going to argue focusing on customers isn't a good idea?
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. But work backwards from, in our worlds, there are known dashboards, right? Or there are known metrics or things that we know drive the business, right? Effective supply chain management, effective customer service. Work backwards for that. You'll find pretty quickly that no, you don't have to knowledge graph everything or context graph everything. Now you do have to figure out, you have to profile everything or a big chunk of everything
Right.
or
You have to
stuff that
have that.
matters. Like you
You
got
have
to
to have
know
that.
that, yeah. Yeah,
What
you
we
got to
call the
know that there's
upper
customer data
ontology.
buried in there. You got to know there's customer
Yeah.
data buried in there. You've got to know there's supplier data buried in there. But this is something that AI is really good at.
Yes. Right. Yes. This is what we call the upper ontology. You do need a schema for, okay, what are all the categories of things? And then you can drill down, and actually AI is, our firm's whole philosophy is human centered, but what AI is really good at is once you give it a really clear schema, a really sophisticated schema, then you can use it to build things out. And it's pretty effective at that.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed, and sorry, Gwen, I think we're going to cover questions later, but I noticed that Carrie
Yeah.
did have a question talking about, who has the scope of the knowledge semantic layer management, right? And the thing that I was, my mini rant about this evolving semantic architecture, the semantic layer. Well, and this may not be a welcome comment, and it may be, of course, fully expected for somebody with the title of CDO to say this. But I do think that the chief data officer should be, at the end of the day, the person accountable to integrate these worlds and to bring them
Mm,
together. And the reason why I say that is based on my highly qualitative, non-quantitative survey of wandering around KM world and talking to probably over 100 people who are doing the job and asking them, well, where do you sit in the organization? And the answers that I got, like all over the place,
yeah.
all over the place. HR, because I do the learning management thing. Well, customer
Yep.
service, which sits in product. Well, sometimes customer service sits in marketing. Sometimes customer service sits even in IT. I'm like the answers were all over the board.
Yeah.
And if this is something that we need to scale as a horizontal, supporting every business function, well, I think there's a natural fit there because that's what CDOs already do.
Yeah. I'm going to flash that diagram up on the screen again real quick. And look at all these different areas. And yes, you will find, and we have observed, it comes from one of these places. But the reason that they come to Factor is because they need to share or incorporate other parts of the organization into their model. And that's how a lot of these things get done.
Yeah, so Carrie, I don't know where you sit organizationally or others sit organizationally, but I do think that this it doesn't necessarily mean it's, go do a land grab. And it's not like I'm going to suggest to CDOs that go and, find all the knowledge management functions and do sort of some sort of, fiefdom type move. But I do think that we need to start playing better together. We
Yes.
definitely need to start playing better together, right? And it's just, I keep the keynote I gave at the taxonomy bootcamp. One of the slides that I had was like, here's an ultimate irony, and this tickles me. The people who are in the business of meaning, right? And this is the knowledge managers, information managers, librarian scientists, plus the people of data. All the data people live in the world of meaning as well. We both do. We're responsible for meaning and managing meaning, but we have different ways of describing meaning.
Yes.
We don't even have a common lexicon to describe the same things, right? Controlled vocabularies, right? Versus glossaries and definitions, like facets versus attributes, right? Like it just even the exact same things, conceptually the exact same things we have different labels for. Metadata,
Yeah.
for heaven's sakes, like we that is about the only thing that we share a definition on is metadata. And I think that would be a great place to start. Could we start by starting to work together to understand, okay, is it a definition? Is it a glossary? Is it a business glossary? Is it a control, whatever, like, and just start to get some commonality in how we name some things for heaven's sakes. And what we'll find
Yeah.
is that we're duplicating work left, right, and center.
That's true. Okay, the that's true, but good luck trying to get taxonomists to agree what taxonomy means. So it's there's two classic problems in taxonomy. One is that a concept will have multiple different words to describe it,
Yeah.
um, different labels essentially, and also that words have multiple different meanings. So you're trying to solve these two problems. Uh, but what you can do, and the last part really of what you said really resonates with me. You can say, what does this mean in our context? You can say, okay, we're going to say that we have this thing called a control vocabulary, and we're going to standardize on that so that when we're talking amongst ourselves, we know what we're talking about. And that's a really important function. We've done that for a lot of companies, actually. We start out with sort of a taxonomy 101 where we say, like, okay, so here are the accepted definitions. You might call them different things, but we can disambiguate. And we can also map. We can also say, this is an equivalency of this. And if you encode that in something like a graph, then you can teach the machines that logic and that semantic understanding.
Yeah, if it makes you feel any better, we've wrestled with the same data forever and ever.
Yeah,
And I think we're slowly starting to evolve. It's taking some time, but we're slowly starting to evolve. I'll give you one example, right? I come from the world of the single version of truth. This is what most people would assume MDM is. It's
right.
evolved past that. Here's the problem, right? We've always known, the data people have always quietly known that there are multiple versions of truth, right? But we've still naively or dumbly or whatever it is tried to enforce a single version of truth, knowing full well that there are multiple versions of truth. Going back to that meeting that I was talking about, me trying to get everybody to agree
Yeah,
and failing miserably at it. I think we're now to a place where, and by the way, the technologies were never the limiting factor here. Never the limiting factor. The limiting factor in the data world is loosely, let's just call it governance maturity, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
implementing and managing a data governance function, even if you just say, let me create one set of rules, right? That's hard enough. Now we're
yeah.
talking about N sets of rules
Right.
and based on context, right? And that's an onion you can keep peeling. How far do we keep peeling it? I think we peel it to the domain level. And what do I mean by a domain? A business function, right?
Yeah,
I don't think that there should be individual governance rules for individual people. I mean, I think that's a little bit silly. Marketing organizations tend to look like marketing organizations. Finance tends to look like finance. I think that we can take it to like more domain-driven design type and have that be the boundary conditions. But within any one context, there can only be one version of truth. And that's exactly what you just said, Bram. So yes, it is incorrect to say there's a single version of truth. However, within any one bounded context, there can only be one version of truth. And that gets back to my story about the CFO asks, how many customers do we have? Only one answer to that question.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit before we get into Q&A. Where do you think that organizations that are struggling with this should start so that they're not facing like an ocean of modeling or, an overwhelming problem the
Yeah.
CDO doesn't want to touch?
Yep. So the advice that I have consistently given for as long as I've been an analyst or a thought leader is what Ashley suggested earlier, right? Well, not directly suggested, indirectly through you, but to focus on a use case, focus on a specific problem that you're trying to solve. We're already doing this in the data world, I would argue, to a certain degree. We are already trying to solve some of these big AI use cases. And to use that and work backwards from there and take an MVP approach, minimum viable
Yes.
product approach with everything you do. It also aligns to more of an agile methodology, but ask yourself, what is the minimum amount of X that I need to support this use case? What's the
Yes.
minimum amount of data? What is the minimum amount of governance? What is the minimum amount of technology, of people? Take that approach. That's going to be your best chance of actually moving the needle is to ask those questions at every step of the game. Don't inventory everything. Don't catalog everything. However, when you're taking that approach, if I'm a CDO, this is my advice I gave to CDOs when I was at Gartner. Do take that MVP approach, deliver value, solve problems, right? While you're doing that, start doing some of the other foundational stuff, right? Start going
Yes.
and doing a full data profile, figuring out what's out there, figuring out who creates it, understand your business processes, understand your workflows. And it's not an either or, it's a both. It's a walk and
Yeah.
chew gum, right? And that's
Start
what CDOs
creating,
have. Yep.
yeah, start creating that upper ontology.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Go have lunch with your head knowledge manager. Go have lunch with the person that manages your internal search functionality. Start to
Yeah.
get familiar with the world of information and knowledge management. That's something that I'm going to be advising heavily this year to any of the CDOs that I talk to.
Excellent. And maybe we'll be talking to some of those together because we're both going to the Data and Analytics Summit, the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in about a week and a half.
You start
So
eating your Wheaties now, Bram. Like start preparing yourself
it's my first
now.
time.
Go buy some comfortable shoes. It's going to be a long 3 days, but it is the premier data and analytics event. There are plenty of CDOs there, and I think what you're going to experience, I'd be willing to bet, is that what you and Glenn will experience is what I experience at KM World, which is this like kind of Stranger Things. Holy cow! There's this whole upside down world. There's this whole other world where we're talking about how to best enable AI use cases, how to best curate and govern and manage this data, how to drive insights at scale. And it'll all be through the lens of data, but it'll all be the same value prop. It'll all be the same use case. It'll all be some of the core challenges. And I think you're going to have a great time. It's a great
Yeah.
conference.
The farmer and the cowman should be friends.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I'm happy to be your Sherpa, as it were,
Oh, that'll be great.
as it were. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Really lively discussion. We both agreed going in that, organic discussions that just kind of find their own path with, rough guidelines, rough structure, tend to be the most interesting. So let's go ahead and pivot to Q&A now. And thank you, Carrie. Hi, Carrie, for your question. There's a question from Steven Sanchez. And that question is, do you have a sense of the percent of organizations that have the maturity and the role of chief data officer? Or are we still evolving and AI will drive that need?
Boy. Okay, still evolving for sure.
Yeah.
Across the board. There's an annual survey that comes out from an entity called New Vantage Partners, a gentleman named Randy Bean, and he does kind of like the state of CDOs type survey, and he estimates that 80% of companies now have a CDO or CDO equivalent, right? So there may
Mm,
not be that specific title of chief data officer, but there is somebody who is the primary person responsible for data and analytics within an organization. Now, you can keep peeling the onion, and some of those CDOs are more governance focused, some of them are transformation focused. About 25% of them, give or take, have a C-suite appointment, right? Who are at the C-suite. About 50% of them are reporting to the CIO, and about 20 to 30% of them are reporting all over the place, including CFO.
Oh, wow.
Um, so the role is widespread, widespread. Now, the point about evolving, absolutely, this role is still evolving. And I would argue there's plenty of room to improve. It has grown exponentially over the last few years. So the metaphor that I often give is just imagine if your favorite professional sports league doubled in size in over 2 years, whether that's the NFL or the NHL or the Premier League. Necessarily the quality of play would degrade.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing is that we have a lot of people who have been thrust, particularly in the government sector. And this is, I'm not judging, but where there's a mandate for every government department at a federal level and now increasingly at a state and even a county level and even a
Yes.
civic level to have a CDO. So there's a lot of people out there with this role and who are new to it and who don't understand governance and who don't understand knowledge management. So we have a lot to learn. This explains why so many of these POCs are failing. It also explains why we have plenty of data that says that only about 80, or only about 10 to 15% of companies are actually implementing any customized forms of Gen AI.
Ah,
Complex RAG patterns, vector
yeah.
databases, only about 10 to 15% have gone beyond using Gen AI at the desktop. Because for your average CDO who's reasonably new to the role, all the stuff we just talked about, Bram, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
overwhelming, overwhelming.
Absolutely.
And when you boil it all down, risky. So I'm a
Oh,
new
very
CDO.
risky.
Yeah, I'm a new CDO. Over 50% of CDOs with that title are the first ones in their company, by the way. And if so, if
Wow.
you're the first
That's
CDO,
eye-opening.
yes, are you going to go running into this burning building? Probably not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
evolving, yes. Thanks for that question, Stephen. It's a good one.
yeah. And just to address the maturity part, we tend to think of this in terms of organizational maturity. I'll flash another slide really quickly. We take our customers through this, and I know it's an eye chart because it's designed to be scrutinized during a long meeting. But, oops, gotta go back here. I can't. Uh, Hang on one second. Let me bring this back. Slideshow. So we look at maturity in, well, first of all, we have a notion of semantic layer that we define, and we ask people in organizations to vote in a group setting. We do a dot voting exercise in Miro on these levels of maturity in the semantic layer and content and technology and tooling, in processes, optimization, and insights, which includes governance, business context, and strategy. And the reason that we do this is because we want the organization to acknowledge and take ownership of its own maturity level. We're not like Accenture is going to come in and say, wow, you're a 2 and you need to be a 5, or you're going to go out of business in 6 months. You better get your act together and pay us a bunch of money. What we try to do is to help organizations understand how to advance through these maturity scales. So yes, there is a place to start, and this is something we freely distribute. We this is part of our sort of intro to factor deck, and we encourage people. In fact, Carrie Hain will know this. We did an exercise at the Information Architecture Summit conference where we asked people to come up and we had a poster and asked them to vote on where their organization was. We did this kind of aggregate thing. And those results, which I don't have in front of me right now, but were really interesting. So, so that was a great question. Thank you, Stephen. Um, Matt
We have
Arnold
one in the Q&A section.
in the Q&A
Oh,
Um,
section.
Q&A.
Okay, why don't you go to
from
that?
The voice from
yeah,
above.
it's simple. Is data mesh dead? Question mark.
Oh boy, an anonymous attendee. Well, let me put it this way. Data mesh, as defined by Zhamak Dehghani, who wrote the book, the O'Reilly book, Data Mesh. Data mesh, as defined by her, never ever reached production. I don't know of a single one that has ever reached production. I've talked to hundreds and hundreds. I was a Gartner analyst, talked to hundreds of data and analytics leaders. As defined by Zhamak, no. So it was never alive to begin with. It was a conceptual framework that relied on these four core pillars, two of which are really hard.
Mm.
really, really hard, which is this one of them being federated automated governance. Okay, that's
Hmm.
super, super hard. Federated governance is hard in and of itself, and then automated on top of it. Holy cow!
That
The
sounds like a
second thing
pipe
that was
dream.
yeah, the second thing that was really, really hard is this idea of a consistent data management layer that spans the entire organization, right? That would enable this magical sharing of analytics across domains that never ever happened. And that layer isn't there either. So what most companies did is like out of the four pillars, which one can I actually do? Data products. Sounds
Yeah,
great. Let's go do data products. We'll give somebody the title of data product owner. We will go buy a data catalog, and we'll go and publish some products into the catalog, and voila, here's our data mesh. That's what we're seeing, and that's what I'm seeing. And don't get me wrong, I'm a believer in data products. I'm actually a believer in data products, but data products exist on a spectrum. Extreme left-hand side, data products are about scale. They're built for scale, right? Where you're not actually taking customer input to build them. The right-hand side of the spectrum is data products as defined by a product management discipline that are built specifically for customers to solve a specific customer need. Anyway, most people are focused on data products on the left-hand side of that spectrum. I think it's fine if your customers are robots. That's great because you're going to need data contracts. You're going to need automated access to it. You're going to need automated governance. You're going to need the scale
yeah,
that comes with that type of focus. But on the other end of the spectrum, as long as our customers remain human, we need to build products that drive value, that
yeah,
are easy to use or easy to understand. Long-winded way of saying the data mesh was never alive to begin with, but what's left is data products and is kind of struggling, I would argue, struggling to maintain relevance. Yet,
yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
that's
The
my answer.
reason I laughed is because if your customers are robots, I know what you mean because
Yeah.
some customers are robots. But no, not people. I'm
Yeah.
talking about like, like with, certain automated processes,
No,
the
I meant
customer
that.
is a
Yeah.
robot from another organization. But that phrase just sounded funny. Um,
Well, MCP, I mean, this is as long as we could, and again, we're going to talk about metadata. Good grief. The Achilles heel is going to be standards around metadata. Because if I've got an MCP server and you've got an MCP server and we can't agree what a customer is, there's going to be problems.
right.
But that
Yeah.
aside, we are fast approaching a world where most of our customers, from a data and analytics perspective, are agents, not humans.
Yeah. So there was a question from Matt, which I think was really more of a comment, and I'll read it. Uh, and to the words, as to the words with multiple meanings issue, I found that with my AI experiments, that the model seems to lock in or index on a different definition than my intent. Then it holds on to it like a dog with a bone. Yes, I've encountered that as well in trying to create sort of an MCP. That MCP, if you don't know, is Model Context Protocol. It's something that Claude created to create a context for the model, which is very useful. And some of our clients are using that with their shared taxonomies. Yeah, I found as well that you really need to say no. It doesn't mean that. It means this. Um, and some models are better than others at doing that. So another question from Tatiana. Are there any free high-level ontologies as well as context knowledge graphs that are accessible to look at? And the reason I chuckle is because one answer is you need your own, but another answer is yes, in some industries there are. For example, in healthcare, in life sciences, there's an ontology called SNOMED, and that is basically like, and then there's also NAICS codes. That's sort of an anthology. It's sort of a taxonomy for categorizing industries. So yes, they are out there, and actually some of them are products that you can license. And our philosophy is sort of a is a uh, uh, sort of grab what you need from those because that standardization, that modeling thinking has already been done, and then enrich that for your context. Great
Yeah, for
question.
a long time, I worked for a data provider called Dun and Bradstreet. And D&B provides corporate hierarchies and corporate, relationships, taxonomies about how companies are aligned, right? Like you can actually buy insights to see, okay, here's Berkshire Hathaway and they own Norfolk Southern Railroad and they own Dairy Queen. And there was a full taxonomy, like a taxonomic relationship of businesses and operating subsidiaries and everything. And what I found is that the more mature you get, getting back to your maturity model, the more companies have this incessant belief that they need to branch those and
Right.
customize those and to build their, speaking of SNOMED, build their own snowflake, as it were, to model the taxonomy, that off-the-shelf taxonomy to best meet their needs. I see this all the time in the world of data around like standard data models,
Yep.
right? I get the question all the time in my world, hey, do you have a standard data model that I could use for my whatever, my manufacturing use case or my healthcare use case and the answer is yes. And it's a great starting point. You can start there, but almost inevitably, people end up, modifying
Yes.
to
Yeah.
fit their own use cases.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. We're coming up on time, and I think we've answered the questions in the queue. Malcolm, thank you so much. You can check out where can people find CDO Matters? Well, you can just Google it, but is there?
CDO matters. So two calls to action, if I may. One, if you liked some of my provocative takes, I did write a book last year. It's called The Data Hero Playbook. I think you might find it interesting. It's all about the mindsets that we as data and knowledge and information leaders need to adopt in an era of AI. That's one call to action. The other one is connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're not already, speaking of disambiguation, there's only three of me on the planet, right? If you spell my name correctly, there's only three Malcolm Hawkers on the planet, and one of them is a pastor in Australia. That's not me. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and would love to exchange ideas with you. Would love to take some of these ideas further. You can send me a DM. Be awesome.
Excellent. And for Factor, you can find us obviously at factorfirm.com. You might have already encountered that URL and signing up for this. Our LinkedIn page, also likewise. Please reach out. You can reach out to me personally. My LinkedIn thing after the slash is just Bram Wessel, all one word, and two S's, one L. And I'm going to post Ashley's video in here. And our sort of little call to action at the end here is go to factorfirm.com. And if you want to talk more about this stuff, you can book a consultation with us, a free consultation with no obligation. So that's there for anybody who wants to, because we just love talking about this stuff. And we'd love to hear how people are struggling with in their this stuff in their organizations. I'm going to post Ashley's video there. Go ahead and check that out. That will be in the recording. If anybody else wants, to check that out, and please, this recording will be available to people who attended. Pass it around in your organization. If questions come up, maybe reach out to either one of us.
Awesome.
All right. Well, good afternoon to you, sir. You're in Ontario, is that right?
Florida, close.
Oh, you're in Florida already. Okay.
Originally from Canada, but
Yeah.
yeah, after spending 25 years in Edmonton, Alberta, I have found myself to a place where I don't have to worry about shoveling snow. So yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, in Seattle, it's still late morning, so we'll bid you all adieu. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day, whichever time zone you're in.
Thanks all. Bye for now.
Bye.